I'm with John Singleton. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you.
So for people who don't know, tell our viewers who John Singleton is.
In how many words?
Oh, well, I don't know. We can go as long as you want.
So I suppose related to CrossFit, so I'm head coach and founder of the program.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been involved in like the CrossFit world since like 2006, 2007.
Yes.
So I did my master's degree in osteopathy, and during that time is when I first started training CrossFit.
Yeah.
And back then CrossFit was like me and a friend got a kettlebell to a park, run around the park, do some kettlebell swings, and lie on our back. You know, that was the where it came from. And you know, over the years, I've had the privilege to work with some of the best athletes in the world, and through that, we developed the training program, and you know, we're kind of continuing to develop that depth of athlete, and also working with from beginners all the way to elite level now.
Yeah. And where are you based out of? It's pretty unique where you're based out of.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm originally from the UK, hence the accent, but we're now based in Mallorca, Spain.
Yeah.
So it's just a little island outside of Barcelona. And I suppose like 3 years ago, we made the decision, because I was traveling around a lot, and we're like, no, actually, let's form a base. And so we've used Mallorca as that base. Now we've got like a permanent group of athletes, and we also have quite a consistent influx of athletes coming over to train.
Yeah. And talk about that influx. At one point, I think it was during COVID, you were able to bring in, I think at one point you had maybe 8 of your athletes there, all training for quarterfinals or?
Yes, so we had, semis was a bit crazy.
Yeah.
I believe we had 11 athletes doing semi-finals that weekend.
Yeah.
And the trouble was, usually like this competition, we're in charge of the training camp, we get to the competition, and everything's organised for us.
You're just a coach.
Just a coach, but during semis it ended up being like we had to then become event organised as well, just because you had so many athletes.
Yes.
The environment was so important, so semis was a challenging weekend.
Yeah, you became logistics became your new thing.
Yeah, we have a good friend on the island, it's one of the biggest Globo gyms in Europe. Because in Mallorca, Spain, the temperature's a big problem.
Yes.
And so this is one of the troubles with online competitions, especially from semis to games, is that your environment becomes very significant. And so we wanted an air-conditioned place where we could do it, because it gets to like 100 plus Fahrenheit.
Yeah, that Mediterranean weather, it just the humidity.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know, the island you're at, I mean, most people will recognize Ibiza.
Yeah,
and you guys are kind of the anti-Ibiza.
Yeah.
Where there's partying there, but there's fitness on this island. So
yeah, very much. I think I'm quite happy and proud of that. It's becoming like a really established place where like kind of the mecca of Europe to come and train.
Yeah.
And the environment obviously helps that. But I think really in the States you've obviously got Mayhem as like the base here, but nowhere else in the world has managed to establish that yet, and that's one thing we really want to do. Yeah,
and it seems like you're doing that when you talk about, we were talking earlier about like Mayhem being the base, like the kind of standard where they have like social media and all these other things that they offer their athletes, and you guys have been doing a good job with that as well. It seems like you're building upon that.
Yeah, we're very passionate. I think most people involved in CrossFit have to be passionate. With the money that's involved in the sport is minimal compared to others. So a lot of the people we work with are very passion driven. But it's become a factor now. Like our training program is, it started off with just me, but now we have a full team. We have a team of coaches. We have web developers, social media who. And it is important for the athletes as well that they can get exposure, like for example this weekend, getting the exposure for Gabby on our YouTube channel, and people get to know her more. And it's something else that we can offer alongside, obviously the most important thing and the foundation comes down to athletic performance, but these other things do help. Yeah.
You talk about Gabby, I mean, you're no stranger to coaching like high level CrossFitters. I mean, you coach Sarah Sigmund's daughter, and then and now you're watching someone like Gabby who's at 22 years old, and she went from just outside the podium at the games, and now she finished third at Road.
Yes.
And she's, like I said, she's only 22 years old. What do you see that's different about her that what separates her from all the other athletes that you've seen or you coached?
So Gabby obviously has physical talent, but I think actually what sets her apart is discipline and consistency. It's actually very hard. I think people look at the athlete life and they see the tip of the iceberg. They go to a competition, they do super well, and it's super exciting to watch. And goes, everyone, I want to do that. Yeah. But actually, the layers that go beneath that become really important, and the choices that Gabby makes are all evolved around becoming better. And that's like the decision from. She goes to bed early. She's not having distractions. She's very consistent in her training. Every decision is made around what's going to optimize my athletic career. And she also listens.
That's it.
Like she listens to advice. She'll ask about what's a good decision or what do you think. And I think that reflectiveness is actually a huge quality, and you can see it paying off. You need to be mature beyond your years in that sport, and rather than just going here, there, and everywhere, she's like, actually, maybe if I can listen to experience and advice, I can take that advantage to my advantage and use it against the competition.
Yeah, and it's obviously paying off. I mean, what was your first introduction, or was it when she was a teenager, when she was competing at the games, or was she someone that's always been on your radar? Or
so I actually first met Gabby maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So before she went to her first games in 2016. So for years, I've always been very passionate about the next generation of the sport. And we ran what we called team camps, basically, where we had a lot of European athletes come. And Gabby came to one of those first team camps, which was in one of the Canary Islands. And she was actually the only girl on the camp. But I still remember there that she'd obviously qualified for the games at that point. But I remember we had a rowing, some interval rowing workout, and she was pulling harder than all of the guys at the camp, and they couldn't believe it. And at that moment, you kind of knew that there was something special. And so then over the years, we've chatted and spoken. I've obviously followed that progression through. And then 2 years ago, she made the decision to make a change, and so since that time, and also due to COVID, we were living in one house, so we had a very kind of close contact from that point, and to be able to watch her consistent development has been really nice.
She's obviously the new young breed of European athletes, and you're talking about how passionate you are about the growth. How is the growth in Europe when it comes to teenagers and the sport of CrossFit? Is it something? Is it something? Obviously, there's tons of potential there. But I mean, what does CrossFit need to do to make it to the point where you're pumping out? Europe's pumping out the Emma Careys and the next Mal O'Briens. I mean, what does CrossFit have to do?
I think that, in essence, I think in order for us to get to the next stage, we do need the finances. Money into the sport, I think, something really significant. So, let's just take this example. It's an extreme example, but Jacqueline competed in Madrid 2 weeks ago. The prize money there for first was 10,000.
Correct.
2 weeks in the States, the prize money for first is 250,000. You're starting to compare those numbers. And the market in the US is bigger. And the one thing that I get fearful for Europe is that we just get eaten up by the US, because, like you say, as you're saying, they all have full-time media staff, they have full-time coaches, they can offer a lot more to the athletes. And I don't want the European training and culture and programs to get left behind and taken over. So I think that it's kind of getting exposure, money into the sport, more money through sponsors into Europe, and that will allow us to grow in that way.
Well, I think that's definitely one of those things that CrossFit, and not only that, but those involved with the sport need to take into account, and also keeping those European athletes in Europe.
It's true. I mean, I think it's something that keeping our talent and developing our talent is something that's very important. And a lot of athletes will look at you moving to the US in order to gain that exposure. And so, I feel very close. We actually just started a podcast called Europe is Coming, kind of for this.
Nice.
For this idea. Give exposure to European athletes and keep developing it in house. at the games this year, 9 of the top 20 females
Yep.
were European. I mean, that's just crazy.
It is.
It's a crazy statistic, and so we want to make sure that we are not left behind, and we're doing we're working extremely hard now to take ourselves to the level where the US is, and with exposure, with more brands coming on board and seeing the benefit, that's something that can really help accelerate our growth.
Now, you brought up an amazing stat right there, 9 out of the 20. Do you feel like Europe probably deserves another semifinal?
So I think that this is the interesting thing, because the European guys are not as strong as the European females.
Correct.
So the girls, without question, deserve more spots. Like European females do deserve at least a few more spots going through. The guys maybe haven't got to that same depth compared to the other countries. So it's like it's a tricky one for CrossFit of how do they allocate spots. Performance-wise, from multiple games, I think Europe could 12 or having 12 total females go through would be justified. 12 total guys would then maybe be a bit more controversial. So I think it's a tricky one.
So instead of being more uniform, you should probably look at it in more like division-wise, maybe.
It's a tricky one.
It is because it can flux between seasons. I mean, this year obviously the European females showed up, but who knows? Maybe next year they didn't. So if you promise these spots, there might be someone that goes there that may not finish in the top 20.
Exactly. I'm going to say that the way they've done it in terms of open participation is there's certain things that I think could change, but actually the way of doing it through open participation, I think, is maybe a good structure. And another, like you say, even when we kind of brush the surface and start looking further and further down, it's very complex of how you allocate spots. And I think that the open participation may be a good justifiable way. Yeah,
I think so too, because that obviously gives you a broad range of seeing how competitive that person is in that field of athletes.
Exactly, yeah.
Where you take, like somewhere like South America, where you're only getting their pool of athletes. It's Africa. It's the African semifinal, but it's basically just South Africa.
Yes.
And it's not really the other African countries, but whereas Europe, it's not just one country; it's a number of countries. A number of and you're also talking, Eastern European, Western European, South, and it's huge.
Yeah, so I think I have heard rumours that they will increase it to 2 more spots, so there'll be 12 European females. Which I think is probably a good number. And I think that's fairly sensible going through.
Do you like this current setup? I mean, obviously we have now with the new schedule being released, there really isn't much change. Really the biggest difference is for the age group divisions. Obviously they have to go through a quarterfinal or semifinals, which you do have some of those age group qualifiers as well. So it's going to be a little bit harder on them. But now we're going to the second year. Do you think that system do you think that system that CrossFit did the first year, it worked with the open quarterfinals, semifinals? The right people went to the games?
Yes, so I think that this, we know this structure at least functions. Could it be optimized? Maybe, but I just think the sport needs no changes currently. Let's keep it consistent. Let's get some growth, and then let's reevaluate maybe in 5 years, not every year.
Sure.
The biggest, and I was speaking with other coaches, and I think this is fairly common, is that I think that CrossFit should take the programming back in-house. That semi-finals shouldn't be reaching out to training programs. They shouldn't be doing it themselves. But actually, it needs to be in-house to make a fair competition and consistent competition throughout. And that's the biggest change I'd like to see. And I feel that, it's very hard, like for example, Froning and Spieler program this weekend. Mayhem did also have numerous athletes competing this weekend, and you go, well, I'm not saying that there's a bias, but what I'm saying is there's an opportunity for that bias to happen that shouldn't be there. And I think that when we, if we were to look back at last season and for example, proving we're going to be programming Asia, and so you have all these biases that come in that I don't think should be there from the start. There should be no reason to have that, and CrossFit taking it back on centrally, I think is the best way to do that.
And you saw that because obviously all the European semifinals were all under CrossFit, so you had a better gauge of what you could compare them equally.
Yes.
Whereas in the U.S., where we had all, North America, 3 out of the 4 were live, but the program was so different. It was hard to determine, who was supposed to,
Yeah, and also I think when it was regionals, everyone's kind of happy with the fact when you get to games, that's when you start doing the random things. You might swim and do a kayak.
Exactly.
And I don't think semis need that. And
no.
I like that. The whole concept of Castro that he put into the sport. Of, in essence, you're going through. You've got to earn your right to do the random stuff.
Yeah.
Until you can snatch well, do chest to bars, classic. Couplets, triplets, that then the next stage becomes the games, and everyone at the games, like everyone this weekend, you knew that no matter what was put out, everyone could do it, and then it just came like a real true test of fitness in whatever capacity they wanted to do it. Yeah. So I think central programming is the biggest thing I'd like to see change.
Yeah. As a coach, how do you what do you think it's going to take to topple or beat someone like Tia, or is it possible?
Honestly, obviously when I was coaching Sarah back in 2015 and 16, Shane and Tia were also there. And so Shane and I have known each other for all those years. And in 2016, we then went on very different paths. In essence, Shane and Tia continued to grow and win and dominate. And Sarah and I stopped working together, and so kind of we both established new paths. And I think now we're getting back up to that stage again. But it's phenomenal to see how good Tia is. Like in the same way of Matt. So the programming this weekend, I think people being, I didn't hear this, but people were telling me that the people being really harsh on Tia and saying maybe she's not in shape. And I was like, do you have any understanding of the the sport, the programming, and what is programmed? And when you see like in second, third, and fourth, the type of athlete and type of girl, and you see Tia ahead of that with that programming, it's phenomenal. In the same way Matt's dominance is phenomenal, and so is Tia's, and So I would like to think that it's possible. I kind of hold that possibility, but she's phenomenal. The pacing, through the run event, obviously, the pacing in the snatch workouts, the execution.
That final event, the duel, it was just watching her. She was beating everyone, but she was pacing herself through every single one of those rounds, and it wasn't until the final round where she just emptied the tank. It's amazing.
And if you look at the handstand push-up workouts, so you've got as a competitor, and Tia was not in a good position at that point. She needed to win. Annie goes out super hard, really confident. Tia gets off the rower like 30 seconds later.
I think she was the last woman off the rower.
That confidence to get off at that moment in time is something quite phenomenal. To just be that confident that you're not like looking over the monitor, like, okay, she's pulling 1,200. I need to start pulling at least that, or But she actually was like, I know my body so well, and I know where I can go to go through. So I think that for the athletes like Gabby aspiring to that stage is really to be able to have competed with someone at that level. I think is something very special. 5 times she's won the games. She's now matching phrases like dominance through sport, through winning basically every live competition. So I think I would like to think that it's possible, but if it isn't possible, this is almost just an honour to have had athletes competing at that level as well alongside her.
And I think athletes competing against her learn something from her as well.
I mean, how can it not be inspirational? Exactly. I would describe myself as a fan of the sport as well, and it's truly inspirational. to go through. And as you said before the weekend, like, you know, if Tia comes through this with this programming, I'm going to be super impressed. Yeah. And I am super impressed. It wasn't, you know, backstage, it wasn't eeasy for them.
Sure.
They, you know, obviously they have the nerves. This is the first time that the legacy could have been broken, and they had to execute. There was no other option. They had to execute, and they executed. And that's really special to see.
Yeah. Well. So what's next for you? I mean, obviously you mentioned a podcast. What's the name of the podcast again?
Europe is Coming.
And where can we listen to that? Where can fans listen to that?
All podcasting services. Okay. Just search up Europe is Coming. And the concept is to give exposure to European athletes and the people behind them. So, and we just want to give that highlight to people, and maybe, you know, it'd be awesome if the kind of US community started to get to know a little bit more about Europe and the athletes that are there, because there are some really exciting stories that have come through. Yeah, and if there's an athlete out there that should they just, if they feel like should they contact you to be on the podcast? Just if they send a message to at the PROGRM on Instagram without an A, we can put them in touch and get that going. Yeah. Okay. What else? Anything else you have going on? We have a few things. You know, we're always working on different things, but the main thing is developing our base in Mallorca. Yeah. The girls, we have a few girls actually competing in Dubai. Yep. So that'll be the next competition focus. And then really it's developing this solid foundation going forward into 2022. Yeah. The main thing we're looking at is like our training location. We're looking to do a team for 2022. Yeah. And therefore space becomes an issue. So kind of building a Froning barn style would be the next stage. Yeah, so building a team, obviously you need athletes. So if there's any athletes that are willing to move to a nice exotic island. If you have a big strong American guy who wants to come to Mallorca, you know, you can send him along. Exactly. Well, cool. Hey, thanks for catching up. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Yeah, thank you for having me. No problem.